A revealing new interview with Pope Leo XIV was published this week at the online Catholic newspaper Crux. In the first official sit-down interview of his papacy, the Pope spoke on many topics, including his prominent advocacy for peace, particularly in Ukraine. He was asked how realistic it is for the Vatican to be a mediator in the conflict. Pope Leo responded, "I'd make a distinction in terms of the voice of the Holy See in advocating for peace and a role as mediator, which I think is very different and is not as realistic as the first one. I think that people have heard the different appeals I've made in terms of raising my voice, the voice of Christians and the people of goodwill, saying that peace is the only answer." To discuss the papal interview and what we have learned, we are joined from Rome by EWTN senior Vatican analyst Frank Rocca. Frank, first of all, when Pope Leo began his papacy talking about peace in Ukraine, meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in person, and apparently offering the Vatican as a potential location for peace talks, there was much hope that he might be actively involved in peace negotiations. Now, in this interview, we see him more clearly stating that a pope can realistically be an advocate for peace, but not a mediator. So in retrospect, is this Pope Leo correcting a false impression that others formed, or is it him actively tamping down expectations?
Well, I think he's saying that they tried. They offered the Vatican as a neutral space. So in that sense, to mediate, but that it's not realistic for them to be the mediators. He says it quite clearly. So therefore, they're going to be advocates for peace. And he suggests that one reason for that could be that the Russian Orthodox Church is very traditionally very leery of the Catholic Church and of the papacy, and that might be a reason. So he's lowering expectations, I think, about what the Vatican can do.
Our EWTN Vatican Bureau colleague, reporter Valentina De Donato, is traveling in Ukraine with the Order of Malta. She asked Ukrainians their thoughts about the Pope's comments. Here is her report.
In light of Pope Leo XIV's recent comments about the fact that the Pope cannot broker a peace deal for Ukraine, but rather that it's more realistic for popes to advocate for peace rather than serve as mediators. And while traveling with the Order of Malta here in Ukraine, I asked people their reaction to the Pope's comments.
It's likely difficult for me to advise the Pope and the wise men who lead the Church. It seems to me that first and foremost, the role of the Church is to bear witness to the truth, to call truth, truth, sin, sin, and murder, murder. Not to try to slip between the drops and be good to everyone. Jesus Christ said, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you." It seems to me that the most important thing is to bear witness to the truth.
That was Father Andriy Halavin, a priest from Bucha that I spoke with, who witnessed the Bucha massacre and the mass grave outside of his church. Atrocities done while Russian troops occupied his city, killing hundreds of men, women, and children. We spoke to Ambassador of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta to Ukraine, Antonio Gazzanti Pugliese di Cotrone, about whose role it should be to broker a peace deal in such complex and divisive times.
It is difficult in this moment to understand, first of all, the real contents of the situation and who can provide activity of mediation. My impression is that we need the cooperation of many states, many institutions, and that to me it is very difficult to think to a path of peace without a large cooperation among states.
In Lviv, Ukraine, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN In Depth.
Our thanks to Valentina for that report. Frank, what message do you think Ukrainians desperate for peace should take from the Pope's comments?
Well, I think that he says, that he wants to be neutral, and I suppose that they would prefer him to be there on their side, naturally. And I'm sure that some of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic bishops think that too. But he also says that on any conflict, he says this broadly, but he says it in the context of talking about Ukraine, that there are good and bad motivations on both sides. So that seems to be, he's trying to strike a more neutral note. But I think the Ukrainians also understand that he's been, since he became Pope, he's been a little more warm toward Ukraine than Pope Francis was. Earlier this week, he told some reporters that NATO didn't start any war, which is almost the opposite of what Pope Francis said. On more than one occasion, he suggested that NATO enlargement had provoked Russia to launch its invasion. So, and then he's been reached out and communicated with Zelensky and so forth. So I think in context, I think he's still probably seen as more of an ally than Francis was to Ukraine, but he's trying to calibrate that, as he does, by the way, throughout this interview. He's always trying to calibrate and to be even-handed, and I think that this is an example of that.
And staying on the topic of this published interview with our Holy Father, what does the Pope say about the mission of the papacy and global problems?
Well, it's very striking. He says, my job is to confirm people in their faith, to spread the gospel. That's my most important role. It's not trying to solve all the world's problems. That's very striking because I think the figure of the papacy in recent years, especially under Pope Francis, who was such an active and such an outspoken voice on so many contemporary problems, many people do see the Pope as a kind of, super advocate, leader of a huge NGO or something like that. So he's saying, remember, my main job is to confirm people in the faith and to spread the gospel. So that's very interesting.
It is. And there is discussion in Pope Leo's interview about unity throughout the church. Tell us about what he says specifically about promoting unity, better ties with our Jewish brothers and sisters, and overcoming tensions with our Orthodox brethren.
Well, yes, he says that humanism is a priority for him, and he says that. This interview was done in July, and it's the trip to Nicaea in late November still hasn't been confirmed. But he says he said even then that he hoped to go to Nicaea to commemorate the council and also to meet with the other Christians, but especially the Orthodox. He mentions that. He suggests that Rome might be a kind of mediator between the Greek Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox, who, of course, are been divided over Ukraine. He suggests that maybe the Bishop of Rome could serve that role. With Jews, he says that he likes to think that the relations with Jews have improved in the early part of his pontificate. There were a lot of tensions under Francis, especially over Gaza. Although it should be said in this interview, he says, in more diplomatic language, but he says what Francis did was that perhaps what's going on in Gaza is genocide. He actually says that could be the case, although he doesn't actually definitively endorse it. He also says interesting things about interfaith relationship, interreligious dialogue with non-Christian religions, not only Jews, but he mentions Muslims, of course, and Buddhists. And he says something very striking, too, I think, which we're not used to hearing in recent decades about when we talk about interreligious dialogue. He says part of the reason of meeting, for example, Buddhists, is to show that we believe different things. And he said, I'm not ashamed to say that I believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross and redeemed us, and I want to make that clear. Even though we have respect for other beliefs and so forth, we also want to assert and make clear what we believe, and it's different.
Frank Rocca, as always, grateful for your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was just a small part of the conversation covered in the Pope's first sit-down interview conducted by Crux. For more of what he had to say, the topics and analysis, go to our sister news platforms, Catholic News Agency and the National Catholic Register.